The NHL Draft, a yearly event where teams are rewarded for their tanking efforts with generational players such as Connor McDavid and Austin Matthews. Except this year, things will be a little different, in two ways. Firstly, the lottery was won by teams that had the 5th, 13th, and 8th best lottery odds this year, so the mediocre Devils and two teams that just missed the playoffs will get first dibs this year. And second of all, there's no McDavid or Matthews-esque player in this draft, so sorry New Jersey, should have picked a different year to pay Gary Bettman to win the first overall pick. This year's draft features two centers at the top, a Canadian named Nolan Patrick and a Swiss guy named Nico Hischier. Hischier? Whatever, I'm going with Hischier since that's how I've read his name all year and looking at draft prospects, even though Elite Prospects says that's wrong.
Nico Hischier.
After them, it's a little fuzzy. This draft will be a crapshoot, though a very wide open one. So let's get into my predictions for what will go down in the first round. In this video, I'll be doing a first round mock draft with analysis, as well as some general background info on these top prospects. Nolan Patrick has been the consensus top prospect since last summer. Just look at that. All number ones. You're in the minority if you think our Swiss friend is better. Patrick's general draft stock has been down, however, since the beginning of the year, largely because his stats this year were much worse than 2015 to 16. Part of that is because he was injured and banged up all year playing with Brandon, the dub, though if you average out his points per game this season, it's only 4% lower than last year. Though that is a downtick in production. Hischier has been improving all year, while Patrick has been struggling at times to keep that number one spot. However, he will keep that number one spot come draft day, because with the first overall pick in my mock draft, the Devils select Nolan Patrick. New Jersey was the worst finishing team in the East this season, so while they wouldn't even be in the top 3 if no lottery had been conducted, they're still pretty bad, and they really need a franchise-changing guy. They already have one former number one pick on the team in Taylor Hall, who should be the top player for years to come. They acquired him through the Adam Larson trade last season, which, by the way, was dreadful for Edmonton on paper. However, Hall saw a downtick in production in New Jersey, though that may have been because he was playing with the likes of Pavel Zacha instead of Connor McDavid, and Larson helped guide Edmonton to their first playoff appearance in 10 years, so maybe it's worked out better for the Oilers, for now. Hall is more of an upside than Patrick, though a core of Hall, Patrick, and maybe Ilya Kovalchuk, since apparently him, yes, the guy who locked New Jersey in a 15-year behemoth of a contract, led them to a cup appearance and then left for Mother Russia 4 years ago, or whatever they get for trading Kovalchuk's rights, could be a playoff contender, so as long as they find talent to build around it. And they have developmental pieces like Pavel Zacha and Michael McLeod in the works, so it could work out. New Jersey, you could have a bright future.
The sun is a deadly laser.
Don't mess it up. Now we're on to the Flyers, who are a fringe playoff contender this season, so when you just miss the playoffs but end up with the second overall pick as a consolation prize, you're probably pretty happy you missed the playoffs. The Flyers feature a core of Wayne Simmons, Jakub Voracek, Claude Giroux, Jean Couturier, and the best nickname in sports, Ghost Bear. They look solid, but then there's the goalie situation. With a rock-bottom goaltending attack led by Michael Neuwirth, the Flyers have been held back at times. What they really need is another game-changing forward, like our Swiss friend, Nico Hischier. But really, I think they need to solve their goalie problem. Apparently the first and second overall picks are in play. While I think New Jersey should stand pat, maybe Philly should trade away their pick for a more established goalie. I mean, their forward group is stacked. There's everyone I mentioned, plus guys like Travis Konechny and Braden Shen, so adding Nico Hischier onto that makes it even more stacked. The Flyers might just be a goalie away from consistent playoff contention. But adding Nico Hischier gives them a ton of depth, so I think they'll select Hischier here with the second overall pick. They could swing a deal for a goalie, but here I think they go with more forward depth and select Nico Hischier. This kind of depth could be comparable to the Capitals or Penguins now with Hischier. So this forward depth, along with tweaks on defense and an actual goalie, could become a cup contender. It's a nice job not making the playoffs, Philly. You actually have a chance to become a cup contender now. So like Philadelphia with the last pick, here's another team that was thought to be good before the season, like playoff good, but failed to reach the playoffs and got lucky with the lottery. The Stars.
It's a star.
Some people thought the Sagan and Ben show would even be cup contenders going into this season. But nope. Looks like more depth than just Sagan and Ben will be needed on defense, plus Alec Gogo's departure for Phoenix, of all places, turned the left side of Dallas's defense into a dumpster fire. But the real problem here is goalie. The Latonen-Niemi tandem just doesn't... Oh wait, you signed Ben Bishop? Congrats, that problem's solved for 6 years. Just bought yourself a 6-year window to build forward depth around the Golden Boys and find someone in addition to John Klingberg who can play defense. This draft will be a great opportunity to find someone who can play defense. Some people think Dallas should go with someone like Gabe Vilardi or Casey Mittelstadt here, but they need left defense, because let's face it, S.L. Lindell's good and all, but he isn't 1D good. So I replace him with Miro Heiskanen, a rapidly rising D-man out of HIFK in Finland. Elite Prospects describes him as an elite two-way defenseman in the making. Wait, 10 points in 37 games? I'm not buying the hype. Oh, but in the WJCs, he got 12 and 7. Yeah, okay, I get the hype now. The WJCs are the only time people in North America watched him. So people in North America at least buy this two-way defenseman stuff. Luckily for Heiskanen, Dallas is in North America. He'll be the first Finn off the board in what is being described as one of the deepest drafts for Finnish players ever. Last year was probably even better for Finns, however, because the top 5 consisted of 2 Finns, a Quebecois, a Mexican, and a pool party. However, he'll be the only Finn taken in the top 5 this year, because I've already mentioned the names of the next 2 players who will be taken in their respective order, and do any of them sound Finnish? So Colorado, after having one of the worst seasons ever for an NHL team, gets the 4th overall pick as a consolation prize. Now we know why Joe Sakic has to be fired. This was the wrong year to tank. Not only is this the weakest draft seen in years, but Colorado got unlucky when the lottery rolled around, and now they'll have to take a player who might be an above-average second liner at best. If only they could have just went all in for one more season and planned the big tank for next year. A much better-looking draft. Next year, they could be able to take the next Erik Karlsson, Rasmus Dahlin, who looks like a much better dual-threat D-man than our Finnish friend from the last pick. Though, I mean, if you look at the stats, Karlsson put up much better stats before his draft year than Dahlin. And they even played for the same team, for Lunda HC.
Time to conquer all of India, or most of India.
Okay, back on topic. Colorado should trade Gabriel, Landeskog, and Matt Duchene at some point this offseason, ideally to tank even harder to get a chance at landing Dahlin. All in for Dahlin, Joe Sakic for GM 2017. For now, though, they'll select Gabriel Vilardi out of Windsor in the OHL, the 4th overall pick. Could be a solid second-line center for the future, may even be capable of playing there immediately, given how dreadful Colorado's play last year was. Blow it up even more, Colorado. Everyone already knows your hockey's poop emoji, you might as well embrace it. So Vancouver is a perennial tanker, but they ended up at the same spot as last year, 5th overall. However, both of those were due to lottery misfortunes. They're even worse than where their picking suggests. The Sedin twins are old. They have no solid youth except Bo Horvat and Brock Boeser, and worst of all, Jim Benning is their GM. Unless Benning decides to trade this pick straight up for someone like Michael Colley, which might go down as one of his better moves as GM, Vancouver will probably take Casey Neistat, or rather Casey Mittelstadt here. They need help on defense, but value-wise, this isn't the best spot to take a D-man. Cale Makar would be okay here, but a slight reach. Plus, the Canucks need all the help they can get at a pretty much every position, even goalie, because Thatcher Demko is just a hit-or-miss prospect, who will more likely be a miss behind their god-awful defense. The Canucks represent Canada, as their name suggests. Now they've represented the Great White North well by being the first Canadian team picking this year, which is great, as last year they picked 5th overall too, and they were the 4th Canadian team. Now, ironically, they're taking the first American player off the board, a Minnesota Golden Gopher commit, Casey Mittelstadt. Mittelstadt comes straight out of a Minnesota high school, though giving his last name, you'd think he came out of a middle school. That will actually make him the highest drafted player out of an American high school in a major sports draft since 2004. I was hoping it would be since LeBron James to make this fact more interesting, but whatever, it's been 13 years. I mean, unless you call the MLB draft a major sports draft, in which Mickey Moniak would be the recent player on this list, probably the 1st overall pick in the 2017 MLB draft, too. No hate on the MLB draft. I would have a video on you if I had time, just that the MLB draft isn't as widely covered as the other 3 drafts. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention, Casey Mittelstadt couldn't do a single pull-up at the Combine, but I mean, Wayne Gretzky couldn't do a pull-up either, so I think that's okay. So the Avalanche had a pretty dreadful season, and the lottery made it even more dreadful for them. But imagine how Vegas feels. They didn't even field a team last season. They only have 2 players at the time I make this video. It was 1 for a while, but then they signed Vadim Shipachyov. At least Reed Duke has someone to play sports with now. Plus, it's a weak draft, as I've mentioned many times already. I think Vegas deserves the lottery-protected first overall pick in this draft. I mean, the expansion draft will give them a lot of nice depth, but no star power. Plus, that sounds like a very Gary Bettman thing to do, giving a Sunbelt team a special privilege. The first overall pick will give them a chance to get a guy they can build their franchise around. 6th overall pick will get them a piece of glass. Since Vegas has no prospects or really no team in general, they just need to take the BPA. Since this draft is a little fuzzy, the BPA here is also a little fuzzy. Future Considerations thinks this guy, George McPhee, is about to take is the 16th best player, not the 6th. But his stats are just, wow, 94 points in 69 games. So with their first pick in franchise history, the Vegas Golden Knights select Cody Glass out of Portland in the WHL. Maybe not the BPA, and maybe not an absolute game changer, but he'll fit Vegas' likely team model. Lots of depth. Maybe the Knights will accumulate more picks as teams ask them not to select a certain player. So don't worry, they'll get more than just a shard of glass. Plus, they have a whole AHL roster to build too, so to make it competitive, they might want to acquire most of those guys through the draft. So now we're on to the Knights' future desert rival, the Coyotes. The Coyotes have been rebuilding for probably around 5 years now, so the question for them may be, when is the turning point? When do we escape the basement of the NHL and turn into a potential playoff contender? Well, soon, Arizona. Just wait. Dylan Strome could play in the NHL next season. Clayton Keller will. They'll pair with Max Domi, Christian Dvorak, and many other young forward studs, and hopefully everyone will develop as planned. With all this forward youth they've been drafting, you'd think they need some defense. And while the Coyotes have Oliver Ekman-Larsson, who may just be the top defender in the NHL, it's just that no one pays attention to him since he plays in Phoenix, their defense around him isn't that great. Time to draft a potential number 1 RHD, and that would be a player with quite an odd first name, Cale Makar, a two-way D-man out of a team I'm sure you've never heard of before, the Brooks Bandits of the AJHL, unless of course you actually follow the AJHL. Makar is a UMass Amherst commit for next season, so the Coyotes will have to wait a few years for his services, though maybe he'll go one and done like Clayton Keller because he was too good for college. Clearly he was too good for the AJHL, though I wonder if he'll actually be a two-way defenseman at the next level. Maybe playing against inferior competition allowed him to score more often as a D-man, and maybe tougher competition won't allow him to score as often. The Sabres are up next with the 8th overall pick. They're sitting pretty with Jack Eichel, a potential bust, and Sam Reinhart, Ryan O'Reilly from that robbery with Colorado 2 summers ago, and Kyle Okposo. They've got Rasmus Ristolainen on defense, and yeah, that's about it. I think everyone agrees that the Sabres need help on defense, but the question with this pick is, do they take a slight reach for a defender, or go BPA with someone like Owen Tippett? My answer here is defender first. Timothy Liljegren would be an ideal, even though he's an RHD, and the Sabres have a nice young one, Risto. Liljegren was the consensus number 2 prospect at the beginning of the year, with some people even ranking him as high as number 1. But then he got hurt, got sick, had to miss the WJCs, his decision-making skills are questionable, and his game seems to have scouts puzzled, though his raw talent may be too much to pass up on for a team like Buffalo, who really needs help on defense. The Wings are next, picking 9th. This is the first year in 25 years that they've missed the playoffs, as well as their last year in the Old Joe, so this is a big turning point for the franchise. They've gone from a perennial powerhouse with the likes of Zetterberg and Dotsuk to a mediocre team, who is even worse in the standings than the place they're picking suggests. Aside from Dylan Larkin, maybe Anthony Mantha, Detroit lacks young talent. Since they're picking in the top 10 for the first time since 1990, this is an unfamiliar place to be on draft day for the Wings. They need to nail this pick if they don't want to go through a long, grueling rebuild, though I do in fact think that they'll have to go through a long, grueling rebuild. Maybe tank hard next year and take Evgeny Svechnikov's little brother, Andre, early next year. So it seems like they should go with perhaps the most hit-or-miss prospect in the draft this year, Owen Tippett from the Mississauga Steelheads in the OHL. If they hit on this pick, great, but if they miss, this may be a long rebuild. This is a risky one. I'm not sure if the Wings will be willing to take it when they're struggling for the first time in a quarter century, but Tippett is the BPA. Tippett's rankings, according to numerous websites, just show you how wide open this draft is. HockeyProspect.com ranks him as the 11th best prospect this year, while ISS has him 4th. The Wings will hope he can live up to that ranking of 4th, because he'd make a pretty good wingman for Dylan Larkin if he pans out. We've got the Panthers picking next at 10th overall. They're yet another team here that made the playoffs last season, but just didn't have what it took this season. While your old coach who got you there last year has fun in Vegas, you're having fun picking at a much worse spot than last year. So what went wrong then? Was last year just a fluke? Are the Panthers forever imprisoned in mediocrity? Well, maybe not if they can make a good pick here. The Panthers really need to solve their goaltending issues, what with Roberto Luongo nearing 40 and James Reimer just not being a very good NHL starter. Despite how good this goaltending class is, they shouldn't reach and pick 10th overall. The Panthers have plenty of high-profile young forwards ranging from Jonathan Huberdeau to Alexander Barkov to Nick Bjugstad to Vincent Trocheck. So even though their defense isn't all that great, they could stand to add another forward. How about Elias Pettersson out of Timrå IK in Sweden, who will be our second Swede off the board. So now rounding out the nationalities of our first 10 players off the board, we've got 5 Canucks, an American, 2 Swedes, a Finn, and a Swiss. Pettersson is a two-way forward, a jack-of-all-trades as Elite Prospects describes him. He's been sitting around this general projection all year, likely going in the 10 to 20 zone. He gained that attention through his success at the WJCs, though this year he was a non-factor at the WJCs. He's definitely staying in Sweden next year, so don't go all in just yet, Florida. Don't even think about playoff contention before you find a goalie. Maybe later in this draft you can find a developmental one, since everyone knows goalies kind of have funky developmental paths. The Kings have been described as a dynasty on its last legs, and I think they're past that. In fact, at this point, they're just the standard for mediocrity. Sure, Anze Kopitar and Drew Doughty are good, but everyone on that team is getting old. And I mean everyone. Plus, they're sure to lose a younger piece like Braden McNabb to Vegas, so the Kings really need some young talent. Maybe shouldn't have traded away first-round picks for the past couple of years, because you have absolutely no young talent, LA. Maybe you shouldn't have traded for Ben Bishop, because if the Stars have taught the league anything, it's that tandems don't work. Though at least you milked 2 Stanley Cups out of this core. That isn't something to be ashamed of. It's just that this core isn't winning you any other sips out of Lord Stanley's mug, because they're old, and you just can't teach an old dog new tricks. So enough with complaining about the Kings. Let's find ways for them to solve it. I'm thinking something like Martin Necas would do the trick. He's a lot like Anze Kopitar in that he comes from that Czechoslovakia general area. Oh, Kopitar's from Slovenia? Well, same thing. And the Czech Republic is actually called Czechia now per Google Maps. Alright then. Well, he is a Kopitar type 2-way player. Okay, that wasn't a dumb comparison. But it may be, considering that Necas' ceiling is probably not even half of Kopitar's. Sorry, but it's true. This draft just stinks. I'd be surprised if any of these non-lottery picks do something at the NHL level. Whatever. Moving on to the next bad pick. So the Hurricanes have the greatest young defense in the NHL, unless they decide to blow a 3 promising young left-handed defender lead for Gabriel Landeskog. They also have an actual goalie now, in Scott Darling. So unless they choose to help out the oft-neglected right side of their defense, which is just in Falk and a few nobodies, upgrading their forward core will be key. Sebastian Aho, or however you pronounce his name, I really don't know, was a nice little steal in the second round 2 years ago. Noah Hannafin and Jake Bean are looking good too, so Carolina's actually been drafting well. The city of Hartford could have a competitive team on their hands in a few years, but anyway, yeah, they need forward upgrades. They have Jeff Skinner, Aho, as I mentioned, and Elias Lindholm on offense. Yeah, that's pretty much it as far as promising young forwards go. The Canes could really use a nice physical power forward above all. Something like Eeli Tolvanen out of Sioux City in the USHL, our second Finn and our second player with a first name strikingly similar to mine. He's a Boston College commit for next year, so the Canes will have to wait for his talents, but that's okay. They might not be a playoff team next year, unless they make smart moves, but they're not cup contending anytime soon. With that defense, maybe once everyone's developed, and they do have a cup-winning goalie in Scott Darling manning the net, they'll be able to do it sometime. But they'll seriously need some forward upgrades before they can seriously contend. This is just the beginning. Now we have Winnipeg, who is thanking the hockey gods for allowing them to win the lottery last year, or the Patrick Laine lottery. Take Patrick Laine second overall. They're actually our second Canadian team with 13 picks, which is mucho impresivos, no Mexico, eh? which is especially impressive considering that last year all the Canadian teams had picked by now. Canada was 5 for 7 in the playoffs, which is a lot better than last year. Anyway, one of the most promising young teams from Lumberjack country is the Jets, with Patrick Laine, Nikolai Ehlers, and Mark Scheifele leading the rebuild on offense. On defense, the Jets are actually stacked, on the right side at least, even though they have Toby Enstrom and Tyler Myers as lefties, though Myers is primarily a righty. I think everyone agrees that the Pegs need another LHT. This would be a perfect spot to grab Juuso Valimaki, another Finn out of Tri-City in the dub. They have a solid forward core forming, and with Valimaki on their star-studded defense now, this defense could turn into one of the best in the league if Buff and Trouba stay in town for a few more years, which I don't know if they will. And I mean, with all this, they're a good year out of Connor Hellebuyck away from turning Winnipeg into Winterpeg. Alright, here's a team that should have been a cup contender this season, Tampa. After ESPN rated them as the best franchise in the Big Four or something, and they re-signed Steven Stamkos this summer, things were looking bright in the Big Guava. Then Stamkos got hurt. Despite career years from guys like Victor Hedman, Nikita Kucherov, Tampa couldn't reach the playoffs, though they were close. If they made the playoffs, though, Stamkos may have come back in time, and they would have given the Capitals a nightmare in the first round. So thank the hockey gods for keeping those pesky Bolts out of the playoffs, Washington, because you would have choked even harder if they made it. One benefit, however, of not making the playoffs is a lottery pick. Tampa would have been overflowing with riches if they had won the lottery, and that could have just created a dynasty if it happened, but it didn't. Tampa's already overflowing with riches anyway, though, so it really doesn't matter where they decide to pick, as in what position they decide to pick for. D-men here would really be a reach, so I think they're going to go with a forward, probably someone like Christian Vesalainen out of Frölunda in Sweden, who will be our 4th Finn off the board and our 3rd in a row. This draft is Finn be lit. First of all, his WJC stats were good, so North Americans' exposure to him was positive, and second of all, he's a winger. Sure, Tampa already has some great ones with the likes of Kucherov and Jonathan Drouin, but what with Stamkos, Tyler Johnson, and Braden Point down the middle, they're doing even better at center. Plus, he's a big winger at 6'3". Kucherov and Drouin aren't size guys, being on the wrong side of 6 foot, and ask any NHL front office aside from Pittsburgh, and they'll probably tell you that they draft size over skill. The Tampa isn't one of those teams. Steve Yzerman and Co. clearly has no problem going skill over size. That's why they're a winning team. But you are going to need a couple tall trees to play the physical part of the game, so Vesalainen can serve as one of those, with an added benefit of being a flashy playmaker. So next up are the Islanders, who may not reside on an island in a few years and could instead reside in Hartford by all the whales. So it would be perfectly logical for them to become the Whalers, right? Well, we'll see about that. Though it does look like the old Barclay can only hold one bottom feeder in the Nets. Okay, the Islanders aren't bad, not as horrid as the Nets are, at least. Heck, they're the last lottery team, the first team out of the playoffs. But they look bad at times this season, as it was an up-and-down season for them. Plus, they made the second round of the playoffs last season. While getting John Tavares some help on offense may be a priority, especially since old JT may want to go home to Toronto next summer, as their defense is pretty well-rounded. Well, and Islanders know the real problem here. The Isles' goaltending depth is about as thick as the plot of the Emoji Movie, paper thin. Okay, fine, everything I'm saying could be wrong. Some Isles fans think they need desperately. Some are content with Yaroslav Halak and Thomas Greiss, but I'm not. Just to throw a bold move in here, Islanders are taking Jake Ottinger 15th overall. Not gonna happen, but this is a strong goaltending class, and Oettinger, maybe the best one of those. I know, I just mispronounced his name 2 different ways, but whatever. The Isles wouldn't be dumb to just go all in with this goalie class, because not only are Halak and Greiss below average starters, but at the prospect level, Elias doesn't impress me. Ottinger played for Boston University last season, allowing nearly 2 goals per game. That's good, even at the college level. It's even a few decimal points better than last year's first goalie off the board, Carter Hart. It's a bold prediction, but if it happens come draft day, you heard it here first. Alright, so we're only halfway through the first round, and that's why I'm splitting these into separate videos. In fact, not even halfway. Thanks, Vegas, for existing. I don't even know how long these 2 videos have been total, so anyway, that's why I'm splitting them. Probably been pretty long, but anyway. Since everyone in this generation has a short attention span, I'm just lumping these into separate videos.